He said a young nurse in a white uniform was standing quietly in the dark bathroom doorway, staring at him. I used to work in a small unit that had a few issues with staffing at night. To help out, I agreed to work the night shift. The unit had just been renovated, with 4 beds. It was about 3 a.m., and I was keeping an eye on the monitors, listening to the patients snoring. While I was sitting there, the drawer where we keep pencils started sliding open. I didn't think much of it at first, assuming it was just because the hospital was on a busy street and the vibrations from the traffic caused it. After the drawer slid open a few times, I decided to leave it open if that's what it wanted. A few minutes later, I heard a noise in the room, the sound of the patient's bathroom door opening and someone pushing an IV pole. Since I couldn't see the bathroom clearly, I thought it might be a staff member from the main floor coming in to wash their hands. When I looked up, I saw a patient we had recently had in the unit, Mrs. G, an older woman who came in with chest pain and became septic due to a gallbladder issue. It turned out that Mrs. G had passed away in the unit. Even though the hospital had been on this site for years, the unit was newly renovated. I heard the patient's bathroom door open again, the rattling of the IV pole, and shuffling feet. I looked up to see Mrs. G standing in the middle of the floor, pushing the IV pole with one hand and the other on top of the pump. She stopped, waved, nodded, said everything would be okay, took a few steps and vanished. It was a strange sight. Soon after this, one of the nurses from the main floor came in to check if I needed anything. I explained what had happened and she was shocked. She said she would never go into that room again. Mrs. G was the first patient to pass away in that unit. She was liked by all the staff and I felt like she was watching over us. When the day shift came in, I told them the story, and they weren't surprised. Having worked in various hospitals and as a nurse extern during my senior year in nursing school, I used to think the stories about ghosts from older nurses were just due to burnout. But now I believe it. Yes, there are ghosts in care facilities. Even if you don't see them, you can feel their presence. They leave behind an energy. Before we jump into our second story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if you're enjoying the content. Stay tuned for more updates. In the halls of a hospital not so long ago, a new nurse had just started her journey. She was still navigating the routines of the medical world, having been at the hospital for only a couple of months. Little did she know, her early days would be marked by an encounter that would send shivers down her spine. One day, she had to take a patient for a special test called an endoscopy. The patient's family had to come too because the patient only spoke Italian, not much English, and they needed someone to agree to the test. After dropping off the patient's family, the nurse walked through a quiet hallway. This hallway used to be for kids, but it had been closed for a long time. The rooms were empty and had broken stuff inside. As the nurse reached a corner where 2 hallways met, she saw a little girl. This girl had big pigtails, a brown dress, white shoes, and held a teddy bear. The nurse thought maybe she was a family member who got lost. Worried the girl might get hurt, the nurse said, "Hey little girl, what are you doing? You don't need to be over there. You're going to get hurt." She walked around a desk to grab the girl's hand and bring her back. But here's the strange part. The girl vanished, disappeared, as the nurse got closer. The nurse felt every hair on her body stand up, and she ran as fast as she could to the elevator. She pressed the button like crazy, waiting for it to come. When she got back to the ER, emergency room, she was very scared. The older nurse at the desk asked, "What's wrong with you?" The new nurse tried to explain, talking really fast. After listening for a bit, the older nurse said, "Oh, you saw the little girl ghost. She's been here for years." The new nurse was surprised and said, "Why didn't anyone tell me before?" It turns out the ghost girl has been seen in the ER, going in and out of patient rooms, and even peeking around curtains. The nurse's wife, who worked on the 7th floor, told a story of patients yelling about a little girl running around their rooms one night. So, it seems this ghost girl likes to wander around the hospital, making unexpected appearances. I'm a nurse from South Africa, now living and working in California. One night during my shift back in South Africa, something strange happened. I had a patient who I thought was messing with his IV, causing me a lot of trouble. After opening the clamp many times, I confronted him. He got really upset and insisted he wasn't doing anything. Instead, he blamed a young nurse in a white dress for fiddling with it. I was confused because our uniforms were not white at that hospital. We both left the conversation feeling frustrated. I didn't think about his story for several weeks until I had a different patient in a different room. The call light rang, and the patient said he had a problem with one of my staff. Curious, I asked what was wrong. He said a young nurse in a white uniform was standing quietly in the dark bathroom doorway, staring at him, and it was freaking him out. My hair stood on end, but I reassured him that it must have been a dream and checked the bathroom to be sure. There was nothing there, but I'll never forget it. In another instance, there was a terminally ill patient with liver cancer in a private room. Even though I worked during the day, the night shift staff mentioned they hated going into the room. They felt something blowing on the back of their necks, and shadows moved strangely. The man and his wife, both Christians, believed there was a black presence above him, making his breathing difficult. His wife asked me and a friend, also Christian, to pray for her. We anointed and blessed the room, praying for peace. After that, the room became filled with peace and love. The man breathed much easier, and people had no more problems going in there. Eventually, this gentleman passed away, but it was in a place of peace and love. When I worked at a nursing home, there was an elevator and stairs between the different levels. The layout looked like a U, with the nurses' station at one end and the residents spread out. I usually worked the night shift because I was studying to become an RN. Now, here's the strange part. The elevator would randomly go from the top floor to the bottom, and about an hour later, it would come back up to the floor you were on. I didn't think much of it, assuming it was just a quirk of the system. But one night, I saw something unusual: the lady in pink. I was in the nurses' station studying when I noticed what looked like a resident with sundowners in a pink outfit walking without her walker towards the elevator from her room at the other end of the unit. Concerned for her safety, I hurried to stop her from falling or going down the stairs. However, when I reached there, she wasn't there. I checked her room, and she was unconscious with the bed rails up. On my way back, I saw that the call button for the elevator was lit up. The elevator door opened, closed, and it moved without anyone inside. I shared this with my co-workers the next morning, and they told me about the lady in pink. They mentioned a big guy who worked there for 2 weeks on the night shift until he saw the lady in pink, and then he quit. So despite my big and strong appearance, I made the decision to quit too and found a job as security in a high-security psych facility. I prefer my dangers to be visible. If you want to see more of the most frightening horror videos, check out our previous videos and subscribe to be notified of new, terrifying experiences. Until we meet again, be cautious of the supernatural and be careful when navigating through dark and eerie situations.